Chapter 2, Agartha. Any misconceptions about how this day would end were dashed when Jinky entered the door of his home. The large hand snatched him rudely by the ragged collar of his newfound clothes and viciously slung him through the air to crash heavily upon the couch. He was startled, but expected it, and he found himself grateful it was not the tender touch of the floor, considering how pissed his grandfather was at the moment. He knew his grandfather would be angry, and he fully deserved every second of it, but it was totally worth it in his mind. They didn't linger in the pool for more than a few minutes, any longer, and the thin barrier still residing between them would have shattered in a heartbeat, and they made their way back into the reality of the bricks with the hurried determination of a snail. They were fortunate to catch a carrier transport on its return from dropping workers off in the fields. The steam-driven train was nearly loaded to capacity with tired crofters weary from toiling in the only soil within the bricks, but two lowly stranglers would neither make the load nor break it, so they were allowed passage. For a small coin, of course. The fields were the lifeline of the sector, providing nearly 70% of the food source for the bricks, with the other 30% supplied by those brave enough to work the dark river for a living, and covered nearly half the area within the region, with right field being a third the size of left. Each level contained fields, though none as large as those of the bricks, but, given their importance, violence rarely found its way into such places. They made their way towards the back, her hand sliding easily into his as they crammed together to slide into the only empty seat left available, and she quickly adjusted to sit on his lap, to allow them a small measure of comfort. And though the transport rank of people thick with sweat and heavy musk, he couldn't recall a more perfect trip in his life, and counted himself lucky for being blessed to share it with her. The bricks was actually the 5th level of the zone, with a total area of nearly 13 square miles and a population of roughly 115,000 squeezed into a living area of just over 4 square miles. The reddish color of the stone, and the consistent pattern of the veining, offered clear indicators of where the First Quarans derived the name from. Trade was the largest source of income, with stone workers and crofters being prized for their expertise. Still, it was possible to earn a small measure of coins with nearly any worthwhile venture, including pit fighting and illegal activities. Drugs and crime were rampant, viral, and a staple believed to be chiseled into the very foundation of the zone itself. It gave rise to ruthless gangs and bangers who found nothing wrong with seizing a prime opportunity and taking a shortcut every now and then. Most businesses fell under the blanket of the Luminary Corporation, a principal subsidiary of the High Council, with branches reported to be located within every viable zone throughout the world. For a small percentage of the profit, they offered supplies, manpower, and protection. An independent security force could be contracted for all others, a niche the old man found to his liking. The executioner's blade was adopted by the old man's military battalion, a moniker given to them by the reigning Supreme High Commander himself. He honored his fallen Juarez when he started the Blade Works Security Detail and Extermination Company. It wasn't large by any standard, little more than 100 employees covering nearly 18 contracts, but it allowed him to take care of his grandson. It offered him a permanent place of employment, a place to hone his skills, and something to leave his grandson when the bugs finally came to claim him. Most people received their job assignments through a Luminary-funded program known as Core Training, an educational institution tasked with assessing a person's capabilities and determining their placement within the sector. Only the elite minds were ever considered for a position within their own department, a tutorial role, which made Kai's assistant position a matter of great pride for her family. Most people of meager means, and small businesses, existed within an area known as the Moors, a densely packed jumble of cavernous storefronts, degrading complexes, and intertwining streets, with all others allowed to live in the surrounding regions, and a few large yurts, made of thick scales and canvas, set up for crofters within the fields. It was hectic, chaotic, and often regarded as a single step above damnation itself, but it was home. And living under such close proximity either united you as friends or separated you as enemies. As he saw it, the problem was recognizing the difference in a world where every heart was cold and every soul black. But the bricks was only one level of Hell's playground within the zone, the 5th level, and the distinction between each was as different as light and darkness. Each zone, regardless of location, was constructed with an established military compound above ground. Agartha Prime was the installation assigned with their protection, therefore making the zone's official name Agartha, and was often considered one of the most exceptional military facilities to ever exist. Only the Naki, military personnel, and approved dignitaries were allowed on the surface. No civilian Quaran had stepped foot on the face of the world in over 10 generations, the bitter bite of dragon's breath offered as the reason why, and, even with a soldier's augmentations, it took the use of a specialized inhaler to keep the body from succumbing to the breath after prolonged exposure. He was sure the levels beneath Prime once bore an official title, but such things were long lost to the Quarans of Agartha now, and only the face value of what each level represented was exchanged in conversation today. Make-believe was the highest level a Quaran could hope to ascend to. The second level of the zone was designated solely for those afforded military consideration, the personnel assigned to train them, and the respective kindred of those offered this opportunity. The sector equaled the size of the bricks, though the layout was structured differently, and maintained a population of fewer than 50,000 people at any given moment. Often called the Crystal Kingdom, the region bore the distinction of being the only layer carved from a massive crystal bed, with dwellings and structures more akin to glass than stone, and left the mind lacking for anything to actually complain about. The region was supplied with its every need. Through the labor of indentured merchants indebted to the Luminari for one thing or another, the area thrived, even unto small allowances given to the families residing within. The residents were wholly devoted towards the success of those in pursuit of their academic and social advancement, with graduates of Olympus Prime, the military academy located in Make-Believe, achieving some of the highest marks in military history, including the SHC, the Supreme High Commander. Technically, Lakeside is the third level of Agartha, though most Quarans simply see it as the basement of Make-Believe. Recognized as its own designation, the area is roughly 10 square miles and maintains a population of nearly 80,000. Several of the crystalline structures litter the region, matching the second level's brilliance, and numerous deposits of precious gems and minerals are mined daily. The Naki views the entirety of Agartha as a single unit, a cohesive structure with multiple layers. But in reality, they couldn't be further from the truth. The first 3 levels of the zone are well maintained, ordered, and structured with a firm military presence dedicated to the sanctity and safety of its charge. Those living under such strict supervision were said to exist upon the mountain top or the upstairs, while those existing below mid-gear, where such guidance was sorely lacking, were said to dwell within the subs or the basement. Mid-gear was the 4th level of Agartha. It bears the dismal distinction of being trapped between the brilliance of the upstairs and obscurity of the subs, with aspects of both firmly embedded within every fiber. With a population of 100,000 people and an area of just under 16 square miles, it was cursed into damnation within moments after the scorch. A massive crystalline tower, known as the Titan's Mountain, sat prominently within the region's center. At the same time, modest traces of precious minerals and gems enticed the eye into dreams of infinite possibilities. Yet the image was a nightmare, a lie, the resources false or far too meager to invest the coin needed to procure it, a promise unfulfilled, creating a paradise infested with poisonous snakes and ruthless bangers. The bricks is often viewed as the gateway into the subs, the entrance unto purgatory itself, and the first real moment when you're forced to abandon any thoughts of common decency or view people through the lens of a moral compass, from that day forward. But, if the bricks is simply the gate unto damnation, the last remnant of social salvation, then the 6th level of Agartha, Rat Town, officially granted you entrance into hell. 90% of all pit fights took place within Rat Town. With a population of nearly 160,000 people and an area of 7 square miles, the region was thick with crime and always rank with a sulfurous odor, oozing from moldy grayish stone, which ultimately attributed to its name. The area is a hotbed for organized crime, illegal gambling, and a haven for political corruption. Yet for all the vile and disgusting attributes of Rat Town, it paled beyond comparison unto the foul majesty in the black walls of Agartha's 7th level, the sewer. With a population of over 300,000 wretched souls crammed into an area just over 7 square miles, the sewer is the epitome of violence and earned its name for what its residents represented, the very bowels of society. Murders were common, sexual assault the norm, and gangs rule every aspect of life with absolute authority. But as strange as it may seem, with all of its faults and failings, it's the most visited sector in Agartha, applauded even more than make-believe. A sadistic nature, combined with an uninhibited culture, makes it perfect for after-hour enjoyment, a place to vent one's frustrations after a long week of work without the need for absolution. And the poorly lit region was often filled with nearly 245,000 lustful patrons on any given day, an unfortunate testament unto the blackness resting quietly behind every eye in the subs. It was never safe to be there, and only tolerable if you were given a pass. Still, unless you were ill-fated to have your genesis there, or was accepted into their culture by right of pain and suffering, you placed your life in jeopardy every time you descended the broken stairs into the madness of the sewer and dared to walk among the living dead. The eighth, and final, level of Agartha wasn't classified as a level at all, but was registered as an unexplored subterranean region existing before the time of construction, the Valley of the River Styx. Known only as the Styx by Quarans, the valley is thought to be an uncharted ecosystem of unknown size, evolved from a prehistoric age. The soil is useless, more of a hardened sludge than firmament, and reeks of animal feces and rotting carcasses. The dark trees are useless for anything other than the growth of an edible fruit known as an yui, a black-peeled delicacy with a taste akin to a sweet plum, and hide horrors within its dense pockets far too hideous to mention in the company of young children. Yet for the hunters brave enough to accept the challenge, and the fishers foolish to cast their nets out into the black waters, the region can be a virtual coin bank, dispensing riches in a matter of days, or claiming souls for a failed venture. The truth of its inhospitable design was beyond reproach. It offered no quarter, nor extended any mercy, but remained fair, in its cruelty, towards all those careless enough to test its patience. It is a foul and dismal place bereft of compassion on any level. It was soulless, and its only reward being the grim fact it connects Agartha with the other remaining zones left in the world, the river flowing beneath the flesh of the planet to connect the Styx with her 4 demented sisters, the Churis, the Seption, the Leprites, and the Legathon, within the high marsh of Zion, the city of the Naki. Only the military has erected a permanent base within this massive region yet to be fully mapped, the Tartarus outpost, and utilized the area as a measuring stick to test the nerve of new recruits. Each level of Agartha stretched nearly 3 miles from ceiling to floor, though the mechanics and piping made it seem much smaller, with make-believe and its basement being afforded massive mirrors that actually graced its people with images of the sky. The stairway connects the 8 regions of Agartha, each containing a system of lifts ascending or descending to unite the zone as one, with security stations positioned to ensure the integrity of each sector. The stairway areas creates a buffer, or spacing, between each level of nearly 5 miles, believed to be created to add stability to the zone's design, but such things are constantly up for debate. An added military detail was afforded to safeguard the stairway connecting the sewer with its fetid shadow. Generally, the first task given to grunts deemed worthy of testing was outpost duty. It is usually regarded as the worst duty to pull on any given shift, the reality of ghastly creatures crawling from the pits of hell to wander the unsuspecting streets above proved to be more fact than fiction. Necessity made the stairway the lone area to carry no blame nor receive any malice. It was pure in its intent, rational in its purpose, and commonplace in its design, the perfect means of granting access, with the least effort required to maintain it. But it was flawed by time, and corrupted by status. Reducing a once brilliant idea, meant to encompass all, onto something more akin to martial law, with travel between the upstairs and the basement frowned upon by the Naki, and security discouraging any attempts to bridge the two with due prejudice. Carriers weren't allowed within the moors. Their large bodies and multiple cars made the viability of a through system completely illogical, given the compact nature of the area, and most were simply used to transport produce from the fields to specialized housing units located just outside the region. However, through divine intervention or just plain luck, they happened to find refuge upon the thoroughfare, the single line designated for the transport of workers to and from the moors assigned to left field, and would be ushered into Quarans Hollow, a way station for field hands and crofters located on the outer edges of the moors. The station was also a routine stop for nearly every quick running on the west side, a transfer coach more suitable for traversing the narrow streets, and offered reasonable transport into the heart of the moors. It was raining by the time they departed the Quick, a steady downpour rapidly filling the grounds and overflowing the gutters, and they made their way down the crowded sidewalks without haste. The rain was actually condensation, a buildup of heat and steam amassing to a point where the moisture grew too heavy and could fall to the floor, in buckets, in minutes, or last for hours, depending on the saturation amount and the heat intensity. Kai's mind flashed back to when they were children, with her leading the way, Zoinks and Jinky in tow behind her, and the three of them racing through the heavy droplets to keep from being soaked. It was warm, pleasant, and assured her of memories she would treasure forever. But now they were older, with Jinx at the lead, her hand softly in his as they rushed to reach their destination, and the heat rising within her would leave far different memories of him than her previous ones. She could still see the small child in his eyes and hear the sound of his voice and his laughter, but the commanding figure in front of her now, his presence forcing her to acknowledge the moisture between her legs as the rain threatened to drench her to the bone, was no longer a little boy pestering her for attention. He was a young man, worthy of her admiration.